Sorry.
Please don't apologize. That's wonderful.
My second monitor is over here with my set list of what I'm supposed to be doing, which I should have looked at before I added back into the stream. But
on the to-do list is always being 78% more gay. Always. Literally always.
It is.
I was just like, what are they laughing at?
I don't know anymore. Hi, and welcome back to the stream, everyone. We had a wonderful break. I baked a whole loaf of bread in that time just to prove it couldn't be
I did not.
No, I did. I was wearing the wig, but I didn't have time to make the bread. That's later though. That'll be later.
Yeah.
Welcome back. So our next panel is Don't Be So Binary, and we have Nikki with a special message as well. I'll let Nikki announce her announcements.
Yay! Yeah, and then I'm just gonna hop off because
Okay.
Yeah. So as everybody knows, our charity for this time around is the Center for Black Equity, which is supporting Black LGBTQ people. Again, check it out. They have some great resources. However, one of the things that I did the last time that I want to do again is I want to challenge everyone to make a donation. So I am going to match a donation during this time frame, during the panel, which I believe lasts until, I don't know how long it lasts. They'll tell you when you get back on.
4:45
Okay, there
West
you go.
Coast time.
So during this panel, I want to challenge everyone. I'm going to match up to $100. So here's the time now that if you were hesitant before to make a donation because you're like, well, I can only donate like $5. I can only donate $1. I can only donate $10. Right now, during this panel, your donation is going to count double. So $5 now becomes $10, $10 becomes $20. And as soon as we hit $100, I will be donating $100 as well. I'm also going to do the same thing tomorrow. So don't worry if today you're just like, I can't do it today, but I could do it tomorrow. But that's my big thing. I want to match. I want to honor everybody's donation. So up to $100 during this panel. Let's make it happen. Center for Black Equity. Have fun. Have fun,
Nikki.
Don't be so binary. I'm gonna go. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Yeah. So I'm gonna let Callie take this. The only thing that I want to say is that I'm here as the person asking questions for the people who are not here asking questions. So I am in no way an expert on this. I'm going to be here asking questions. If I ask a stupid question, it's because it came to my mind as something that someone else might wonder about and not necessarily because it's something that I wonder about.
Super valid.
We'll tell
That's
you if
all.
it's stupid.
Okay,
We'll
good.
tell you if it's stupid.
There will be
Remember,
so
there
much
are no
yelling.
stupid questions, only stupid people.
No, there's no stupid people, just Randy.
So
No, I'm kidding.
Come on.
No, I'm kidding. I love you.
So mean. Gosh.
So now we know what being binary is like. Non-binary is like. And doesn't solve the world's problems.
So the obviously, Don't Be So Binary is a reference to a line in Discovery. And something that we were kind of talking about in the allyship panel is the idea that being queer looks like one thing in particular. Being trans looks like being one way in particular. Being a man, being a woman, being non-binary looks one way in particular. And the reality is that people's identities, sexualities, gender identities, all of that stuff, it's incredibly, incredibly complex and very complex. That's a word. Complex and nuanced. I was thinking ahead. I was thinking about nuanced when I said complex. Right. Anyways. And so I'm a non-binary trans person. I'm kind of a representation of the fact that gender is not binary because I just kind of decided that I don't like gender and decided to opt out is kind of where it came from for me. So I figured we would start with Anna and I just kind of explaining the ways that our identities don't fit into the binaries that like we typically see things organized into. And so to just start at the super 101 level, it's probably good to talk about what we mean when we say binary, right? So the idea of binary is that like you are one thing or another thing. You are a man, you are a woman, you are gay, you are straight, etc., etc. And there are people who fit into those categories and are very comfortable in those categories, and that's all fine and wonderful. But there are lots of people who don't, and there's a little bit of stigma that comes with that sometimes. And people who are like in between binaries or just don't exist on the binary scale at all. So to explain how I fit into that, I'll give just a little bit of my background. I won't spend a ton of time given the bio, but I came out as a trans woman about 5 years ago. And at that point in my life, I didn't realize that there was another answer. Like if I figured out, like I was assigned male at birth and that didn't sit right with me, the only other option was like, oh, I must be a woman. And there's lots of feminine things that I like. I like wearing dresses. I like makeup. I liked nails and fancy hair and all of that sort of stuff. And so I kind of jumped out of the man box directly into the woman box. And that felt okay to me for a while. But as time went on, I started to learn a little bit more about gender politics and how all of that works, and the pressure that trans women face to perform femininity. In that, if well, you say you're a woman, but you don't like wearing dresses, so how can you be a woman? Or you don't wear right, Randy. That face, you're 100% correct. Like that reaction is the correct one. Yes, that reaction is the correct one. And I really started to ask myself, like, do I really like these things, or do I like these things because I feel like I'm supposed to, because that's what women are supposed to like, right? Am I going to have problems at the grocery store because I bought a men's razor as opposed to a woman's razor? Like these are the things that trans folks often have. Oh my God,
don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, right?
Like I can't get a shower puff at the store. Like why do they make, why?
It's anyway, the women's one is pink and $2 more. Is
right. Like, literally all of it. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Yeah.
But these are the questions that a lot of trans folks end up having to face, right? Because a lot of times like existing in public is not safe. And so what are the little things that I'm doing to signal that I don't quite fit into that box that might out me to someone else and make me less safe in the space that I'm in, right? And so it's like, okay, I can only shop for shoes in the women's shoes section. I can only shop for clothes in the women's clothes section, so on and so forth. And looking back, I think I was probably a little bit more influenced by societal programming than what I actually wanted for myself. Or maybe my interests just changed, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
But it really started when I had bottom surgery, and the gender dysphoria that I felt surrounding my body, the intense discomfort that I felt about the way that my body was arranged kind of disappeared. And I think I had shed myself of a lot of psychological baggage around my gender and the way that I looked and the way that I felt. And I was able to think a little bit more honestly about, well, who actually am I? How do I actually feel about this question of like, what is my gender? And I had a couple of experiences that kind of demonstrated to me that I had started to leave that thinking behind a little bit. One is I went shoe shopping, and I went through the women's section, and I didn't like anything that I found there. And I just kind of strolled over to the men's section, and I was like, oh, there's this really cool pair of Vans. And I had thought to myself, like, gosh, a year ago, I would have been terrified to do this. But now it was just like, well, there was nothing in the men's section that I like, so let's just go to the women's section and see what's there. And it took me a minute to realize, like, I wouldn't have been comfortable doing that. And then I realized that it had been a while since I wore a dress. It had been a while since I wanted to wear makeup. It had been a while since I wanted to paint my nails. And one time I even painted my nails and I hate it. I felt really uncomfortable, and it almost triggered gender dysphoria to paint my nails, which was weird. And I was just like, what does all of this mean? And there was another experience that I had where I had this outfit where it was like super stereotypical butch lesbian. I had like this really cool, like feminine sport coat with a white V-neck underneath, like skinny, like black skinny jeans, and these
walking
ridiculous...
onto the set of the L Word.
Right, exactly. But I'd forgotten my hardcore les boots that I bought.
Oh no.
So I just had these. I had these ridiculous red workout shoes.
Perfect.
And so I made a joke. I was like, "Oh, this is my lesbian dad outfit." But then I was like, wow, that's like a masculine coded word that I like made a joke about attributing that to myself. And again, I like that would have made me so uncomfortable to do a year ago.
Okay.
And then I did an episode of my podcast where every once in a while I do a mailbag episode where people will write in and ask questions about like how to deal with family members, how to come out, questions about their own identity and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And someone was asking the question. It was like, well, am I just kind of a feminine guy or am I non-binary? Like, am I trans enough to claim that label? Am I non-binary enough to claim that label? And spoiler alert, the answer is yes. Regardless of the question, the answer is yes. If you feel it fits, then you are enough of that thing to claim it. But one of the things that I would do to kind of check myself and figure out where I sit is that I would try out different language on myself. And there's all kinds of like exploration that we can do around our identities and what these words mean and what these phrases mean. But I think what's important is like, what are you comfortable with? Like, what are you comfortable calling yourself? What are you comfortable being called? What feels right? And what feels right is right. And you can unpack why that is at some other point. And so the thought exercise that I prescribe to this person is literally say the words out loud, at least because to me, it feels different when you do that versus thinking it through in your head.
Definitely.
And I would say like, okay, my name's Callie and my pronouns are he, him. Incredibly uncomfortable. It does not feel right to me. It feels like just terrible, awful. I want nothing to do with that. It's gross. It's icky. I don't want it. Okay. My name is Callie. My pronouns are she, her. I don't hate it, but it doesn't quite fit. It's like a t-shirt that fits a little too tight, but my name's Callie and my pronouns are they, them. That feels really comfortable. I'm not sure why it feels comfortable, but that feels comfortable. So like I had prescribed that thought exercise to this other person. And this was kind of when I was in the midst of having this realization myself. And so I did, I did that thought exercise and I did she, her, and that felt right for a minute. But as I recorded an episode of the podcast and then I listened to it probably 10 or 15 times before I put it out. And I heard myself saying the words over and over and over again. And I was rolling all of this over in my head about the clothes and the language and all of that sort of stuff. And I just started to feel differently about it. And so I had to talk with my wife. I had to talk with some of my friends. And I was like, I think I want to try on they, them pronouns just to see how it feels. Like I love my name, no interest in changing my name. It feels completely correct to me. But I want to try out changing pronouns just to see how it fits. So it was just like a group of like 5 of my closest friends. They were my derby teammates because those were the folks at the time that I see the most in real life aside from my wife.
It's so gay. I love it.
It is incredibly gay. And so I asked that, and like the second that my wife used they, them to refer to me for the first time, she was doing that really cute thing where she speaks on behalf of our dog, like the dog's talking to me. And she did that, and she said they, referring to me, and I was just like, oh man, that feels good. That feels really correct. And then I like kind of started doing that thought exercise again and again. Like, my name's Callie. My pronouns are they, them. I'm non-binary. That fits. That works. And then I was kind of able to like retroactively go back and put all of the pieces back together and sort of make that make sense. And basically what it came down to is, even if we're talking about stereotypical gender norms, there's a lot that I don't fit into on either side of the gender binary, right? I'm not the most feminine person. I'm not the most masculine person. I have a pretty deep sort of baritone-ish voice that I enjoy. I don't really have any interest in changing that. But I like having somewhat stereotypically femme hair. I don't like makeup. I don't like painting my nails. I don't like wearing dresses, that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of like in between the gender binary in a lot of ways anyways. But what I kept thinking about is like, I keep referencing the gender binary in order to figure out who I am. And we're supposed to be leaving all of that behind, right?
Yep.
And so for me, it fits into non-binary in terms of referencing the gender system that we all live in. Because even if I want to reject that system completely, I live in a society that is organized that way. And so I still have to figure out how I interact with it. and I have to figure out, you know, a name or a word for however it is that I fit into that.
Right.
But I also just feel politically like I want to opt out of that system entirely. And so for me, it's a mixture of those two things. And that's how I came to, I am actually non-binary.
Interesting. Yeah. And it's funny, like I'm not any of that at all. And like, it's just who I am. But like, I don't have, like, if someone like said, you know, her to me, like I have no like visceral reaction to that whatsoever. It's like, no, it's just not right. I mean, like, I think also maybe because in the like male gay world, we use the vernacular of like her and she to each other. And so for me, like, I have no like response. I'd be like, hey girl, what? Like, it doesn't like, for me, it's not a, I think maybe even that's like in the Venn diagram, that's not a like one-to-one overlap with like gendery things, right? Like I feel like that's just vernacular, which is a little bit outside of that. So I feel like if that didn't exist, maybe I would have a different reaction to someone saying that to me. But it's so interesting to hear people like have a strong reaction to it, when for me it's like, no, that's not right. Like it's fine, but that's not right. You know, like it doesn't bother me. So that, I mean, that reaction is interesting. Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing that I guess it's uncomfortable for some folks to sit with, the idea that like, for some people, the idea of like really not caring about what pronouns you're referred to with, for some people, that is very directly a commentary on their gender identity. But for you, it's not. And both of those points of view are valid.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
True.
My sibling does not really has made it very clear that she doesn't really sit well with they them, but is equally comfortable with he him and she her. And has talked about how they're not 100% sure what she's not 100% sure what
see, we all get it wrong sometimes, even with family members, even with people we love. I just wanted to point that out because I don't want any at least for me, like I would feel guilty, not in this situation, but in another one, like saying the wrong thing. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Anna, but
no, you're fine. But so she has kind of recently been saying like that she kind of identifies with the term by gender, but there's a lot of different terms. And, you know, the important thing is to, even if you don't understand what all these terms mean, the important thing is to ask the person, be like, okay, so what are your pronouns? Because otherwise, maybe, because I have so many non-binary friends, I would assume they them, but then she told me, she's like, no, I prefer she her or he him. And before she'd come out of this, I'd suspected, because you know, she dressed more masculine and short hair, and then there was just one time at a restaurant, waiter had asked for drink orders and stuff, and then turned to my dad and my sibling and said, gentlemen. And then the smile on her face was just like, yes, which is the smile. And then, of course, she has a very like soprano voice, and is like, oh, well, I'll have. And he was like, ah, like, but she was like, no, you didn't do anything wrong. It was magical.
It was
like,
magical.
And it was so sweet.
Well, yeah, and that's an important thing, is like, we want to decouple the idea that that pronouns are inherently gendered. Like for most people they are, right? But there are non-binary folks who are comfortable with he, him, or she, her. It's not always necessarily they, them. And some folks use neo pronouns like ze, them. There are a couple of others that I'm not able to think of off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, just like Randy, like you were saying, there are lots of cis gay men who are fine being called she, her. There are lots of cis lesbians who are comfortable being called he, him as well. Like he, him lesbians are a thing.
There you go.
So yeah, and that's a thing that's like, it's I don't think that's probably known in like the wide like mainstream gay culture, but like that both of those things are definitely a thing.
Yeah. Like I don't have it's not like I don't have any it's just I like I said, I think it's that vernacular too. Like I think it's like drag culture and all like that. I think we have that weird thing because of drag specifically, but yeah.
But
so
let's
Anna,
talk
do you
about
want
other
to
binaries?
Yeah, tell us about your
well, so while I'm
cisgender, it's so mean to me earlier. I just had to.
No, it's valid. It's valid. It's funny too because I'm usually never mean to Randy. I love him, but then I was just like,
I love it. I love it.
It's literally the bisexual trope.
It's all right.
Yeah, there we go. So I am cisgender. I think that's the only thing about myself that I have never been confused about. So like, Thank God for that, because the rest of me is a freaking mystery. So I have recently decided to go with the term bisexual. Not even sure about that. It depends on the day.
And that's fine.
Some days that chafes. Some days it's like, nope. But the thing I'm very, very comfortable with is asexuality, being on the asexuality spectrum. I am not fully asexual. Like, I am not. There are some people who are asexual who have never felt arousal in their life. And, like, because I'm not full on that side of the spectrum of asexuality, I constantly was like, no, I must be like, I'm just like, for the longest time, I thought people were making it up when they talked about how horny they were.
Really?
I was like, for starters, I did not realize that actually watching porn was like a thing. I did not realize masturbation was a thing.
What? Wow,
I was mind
amazing to think about.
blown.
And Anno, can you
And
take
then
a
somebody
second
around
and
me in
explain
college, like-
asexuality, just in case there are folks watching who don't understand?
Yes.
So asexuality is a huge spectrum. Basically, asexuality just says the lack of sexual desire. You don't get aroused at all or as often. It's not just being like, oh, well, I'm not a slut, or like, oh, I'm not a prude,
Right.
or like, or this person's a prude or something. It's really not that. It's just the like, because you can have those feelings and not act on them, and that's
Right.
you know,
That's
that would
different.
be what is more traditionally like, I'm not a slut, which for starters we shouldn't say slut in the first place.
Right.
And
But,
so on.
okay, I don't know.
Where-
I'll come back
whereas-
to that, I'm sure.
We shouldn't say it in a derogatory way, for sure.
Right.
Yes. Whereas, don't worry, Randy, we know who you are.
Exactly. Right. I want you to use it, and I'm offended that you don't want to.
But like for me, again, like the concept of masturbation, I was like, wait, like people actually do that? I thought that was like a what? Like
Wow,
mind
I love
blown.
that. Okay.
I would watch Scrubs. Like in middle school, I watched Scrubs a lot, and the amount of sex they would have on that show. Yes.
We have an Anne to your Anna saying yes. I love it.
Like the amount of sex they would have on that show, I was like, that's just TV drama. No one. Which, I mean, it's true. As a doctor, you probably don't have that much time to bang that much, but
That's fair.
but I was just like, no one like looks at a person and is like, ooh, because I was like, surely you need to like have 7 conversations at minimum. Like,
that's marriage.
And furthermore, my sibling is also on the asexuality spectrum. So that frame of reference of growing up in a household, we were both like, we had a conversation about this like a few years ago about, we were like, yo, people get horny? We lost our minds.
So, honest question, like, what did you think your parents did to bring you into this world? You thought that they just like forced themselves to like
No, I recognize that it happened.
Okay.
But I was more like, surely there's
One drunken
emotional
night,
development or
Okay.
alcohol, or just like, you know, to me it's like they've been married and in love since college. I mean, so to me it was like,
you could see it as a just a means to an end. Like, well, we want to have a kid. This is a thing we have to do.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I definitely could see it that way, and I like definitely recognize that some people were like more into it, but I was like, that's like gross people though, and I like didn't understand that was like a normal feeling.
Gross people.
I was just like,
okay.
And then I remember like the first month of college, I now call it mating season, because like,
hey, that's fair.
Because like all the freshmen have suddenly their parents aren't around. They've met all these new people. And they're having all these new things.
Primo hormone time.
Hardcore mating season.
Yeah, it is.
And I actually started to pursue one guy just because everyone else was hooking up, and I was like, this guy's around. Surely.
That's also college, right? Like people just like try stuff.
Here's the thing. The reason he was around was because he was a complete piece of but I know nobody else was taken. But nothing came of it, thank God, because I was just like, I guess this is a thing. I don't know. Is this how what we find love these days? Like, little like Snow White in the forest. Like the forest is just dicks. But
Someone out there who's good at drawing, I challenge and
Please
beseech
draw-
you to please
I'm
draw a
so
picture of Snow
pale.
White surrounded by.
I'm so pale. I can be her.
You
Like,
can be her. You can. Now we know what to cosplay you. We're just gonna get one of those big like installation pieces that just like walls of dicks following you around. Snow White. No one will get it. It doesn't make any sense. And we
I
won't
did
comment.
used to work as a Disney princess, so that's fun.
There you go. There you go.
Both as Snow White and then Anna from Frozen. Anyway, and that's but the whole thing is like the sexual attraction is very low for me. It happens. I once described it as I sometimes get offended when my body's aroused because it happens so rarely. I'm like, we're doing this? Okay.
Well, and I think that speaks to
Whatever.
the fact that you have referenced asexuality itself as a spectrum, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because asexuality is a
Right.
reference to the lack of sexual desire, but it doesn't necessarily mean you never ever feel it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
One of my
Hashtag.
absolute hashtag forests of dicks. One of my absolute best friends is also ace. And is also aromantic, which I will explain in a minute.
Yes. we need to get there.
And and that being said, she once told me about like being on Pornhub, and I was like, "What? Why?
What?
Why would you ever go there? What do you need there?" And she was like, "I don't know. Sometimes I'm bored and want to fall asleep." I'm just like,
I mean,
Like,
same,
and
but
I-
different reasons or different methods, I guess.
I was gonna say that's usually what I use Star Trek for.
and like, I can't really explain to you how that works for
Of
her
course.
because the whole thing's a foreign concept to me.
Right.
But like
But
that's
like there are
another
folks
thing.
who will experience sexual attraction, but only under certain very specific circumstances.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
only if they're romantically involved with someone, then the sexual attraction becomes,
demisexual.
or- yeah,
And that's if you're romantically attracted first and then you can become sexually attracted, that's demisexual, which is a under the broader umbrella of asexuality as a spectrum. There's also the term gray, which basically just means that you're not necessarily asexual, but you have a very low sex drive, and that's on the A spectrum, but you're not necessarily comfortable considering yourself as asexual. And for a while I went with gray, and then I was like, no, y'all just horny out here. I think I might be more than just gray. Like, wow. Because it was, again, my frame of reference growing up is like, I have a sibling who has no interest in partying and,
Right.
sleeping around with other people. And we're both just like, yeah, wouldn't it be fun to watch Star Trek instead of like, why would anyone have
Why not
sex
both?
when there's Star Trek? And like, why would anyone masturbate when there's Star Trek? Like,
This is
Like, I
probably a
was
relevant question for you to answer, Anna.
yes. Oh God, yes. Yes. Okay, so I am also a hopeless romantic. I am not aromantic. Aromantic means that you don't feel romantic attraction. It doesn't mean you're shallow. It means you still, can have great, wonderful friendships and wonderful relationships, but it means you don't think of a person as like, oh, I could spend the rest of my life with them and we could like make them eggs for breakfast. Like, when you get those like hopeless romantic thoughts, that's not a thing. You can still, you can be aromantic and not be asexual. You can have a super high sex drive and be aromantic, and that's completely valid as long as all parties involved are consenting and understanding of the situation.
That's like 90% of gay men. I'll be honest, it happens a lot.
And that's
then,
like what we're circling around, because I just want to name the concept and then I'll let you explain it, Anna. What we're circling around there is the fact that romantic and sexual attraction are not the same thing.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
the society that we live in often ties them together as
Those
if they are
very
the same
much
thing,
coupled,
right?
in society.
Yeah. So Anna, please. continue.
there's a line in Dead Like Me by Brian Fuller that has stuck with me since I would watch the show on the air when I was probably way too young to be watching the show on the air.
I love that show.
It's so good. Where a character is kind of a douchebag, though, says, "You don't understand. Girls fall in love with guys in order to have sex. or what was it? They have sex in order to fall in love with guys. Us guys will fall in love with you just to get you to have sex. And it's like this element of like, he was basically saying like, I mean, he was a douche in the character,
Right.
but he was talking about like all the romantic overtures that a man, again, this is generalization, and he was a douchebag character.
Right.
Overtures that he'd do to get a woman to sleep with him,
Mm-hmm.
because in his mind, he sees her, he already's like, boom, I want sex. That's all I want. But he was basically saying, whereas the woman he's pursuing, she needs to have feelings first.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to basically force this fake romance from him to do that for her, so that we should give him what he wants, which is sex. And that's completely deceitful. You can be open and honest about that and have completely consensual, wonderful relationships with clear communication. But if you're like, oh, I'm going to lie to this person and say that I see a future with them, like, that's not cool.
Yeah, no.
But so about dating, I find that when I tell people that I'm on the asexuality spectrum, if they were considering me as a romantic partner, when I say asexual, they hear never want to date anyone. Like, don't want to be involved with anyone. Don't see a future. Don't want any romance, which is not true. I would
because
love
of the tying together of romantic and sexual attraction.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
Yeah, and also because hookup culture is so big now, a lot of the way people start relationships is they hook up and then they keep hooking up and they stop hooking up with other people and they become kind of exclusive, and then they decide, hey, how should we define this? That's not my jam. I'm not going to hook up with someone that I don't already have a connection with, because I, like, even when I'm not aroused, if I care about someone deeply enough and that's something they want, it's not like a thing where, like, if I'm touched, I scream.
Right.
It's more like, hey, this is something you want, and because I care so much about you, sometimes you do things that aren't necessarily as good for you as the other person, like, and that's fine.
Sure. Yeah.
And as long as
I gotta do the laundry this time.
And I think, like, I don't know that we have, maybe there is a word and I just don't know it, but like, I feel like romantic arousal is a thing, right? Like, because I'm not asexual, but I'm far more of a romantic person than I am a sexual person. And
someone pulls out an instrument and starts singing.
Yeah, like there are moments
my heart is like, oh.
And for me, it's like, it's that feeling that I get like when I'm making my wife coffee and I want it to be the most perfect coffee she's ever had. And I'm so excited about making my wife coffee because it's going to make her smile, you know? That's still a thing.
Yeah. One of the most severe crushes I ever had was just on someone who'd been a huge friend and had just been there for me through tough times. And had always been there for me through multiple tough times. And pick a better one. I'm a mess.
Don't say that. You're on our team. You're amazing.
But this crush, it was like, he'd always been there for me. It was a huge deal that he was always there for me. And then there was just one day where I ran into him, and this is in college, and he was like, oh, by the way, you were having a rough night last night, so I didn't know you were already out and about and that I'd run into you, but I left some chocolates outside your door. And it was like, that hit me, and like, that's definitely like romantic arousal, because I was just like, this is someone I trust, this is someone I feel safe with, this is someone I genuinely love even beyond romance, because just as a friend. And there was that showing of affection back that was huge. And I think everyone can recognize, like, when someone that you're interested in or a romantic partner or something does something like that, you're not immediately like, you can feel moved without being like, it's time to bang. Like, they're different. Romantic and sexual are different.
Of course. And it's funny, like, and to your point of like about hookup culture and whatever, like, for obviously not all people, and obviously not, I don't know what the percentage is, but historically at least, and still right now for like a big chunk of people, like, having a sexual relationship with your partner is important. And like, I don't know, it just seems logical to me to like make sure that works before you get emotionally invested in a person. Because like if that's going to be something that you need and you cannot get it from that person, like I don't know, for me, like that just feels sad, you know? And so like I kind of get like trying it out for, I mean, it doesn't have to be immediate, right? Like a couple of dates or whatever, that's fine. But like I think I would feel terrible like going out with someone for like 3 months and then having sex with them, and then it's like, oh, this is not good. Now we have to live our whole lives like this.
I
guess I just don't believe in the like one prescribed person for every, you know, like that's the only one person that's for you or whatever. So
I need to interrupt the conversation just briefly for a teachable moment, re-allyship. We should be careful about using the phrase spirit animal because lots of Native folks are very, very uncomfortable with white folks using that term.
Oh wow!
So we should Google that, but I just wanted to like call attention to that and say that like that's
say Patronus instead.
Yeah.
Oh no, we can't say that either now.
No,
damn it!
No.
Oh, those books wrote themselves though. They came from nowhere. The aliens left them for us. So it's fine.
As someone who grew up a huge Harry Potter fan, and as my dad is a bluegrass player, and he also loves Harry Potter, and and I got him a T-shirt that says "My Patronus is a banjo." J.K. Rowling does not own those books anymore. I don't care. Those aren't hers.
Who that is. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
aliens left them for us.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a Mormon like situation. It was buried in the ground and someone found them. Yeah.
By being a transphobe, no, it's mine now. And as far as I care, now all of the characters are trans. Shut up, ma'am. Like I don't care. Like
hell yes.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And so, but going back to your point, Randy, for me, what I have identified as the solution to that is non-monogamy.
Yes. And I mean, that's a whole other thing. Yes. But I mean, but then where do the people fit who want to have monogamy?
Totally.
I mean,
because of whatever it is, like,
yeah,
do you just
absolutely.
not do it for 3 months and then you find out it sucks, or do you like,
No, you're totally right.
Yeah, and everyone has to decide that for themselves, obviously.
Well, yeah, and I think, I don't know, I think our society, just generally speaking, does a really bad teaching us to have those conversations up front with our partners.
Yes.
Because that was when, you know, like super long story short, Celeste and I met, things got super heated the first night, and she was like, well, are we girlfriends now? And like I so wanted to just be like, yes, because that would be a really cute story to tell, but I had to stop and be like, okay, like I want to be, but I cannot be in a strictly monogamous relationship, and if that's something that's really important to you, our relationship may not work. And that sucks, and if like I would be very sad, but like you have the right to have your relationships arranged in a way that makes sense to you, but I can't
know what's necessary.
Exactly. And that, you know, that was a conversation that we have, and we're not strictly monogamous. We're not actively polyamorous, and that like we actively seek out other partners and stuff like that. But like, you know, I make out with people at cons, do sex stuff with people at cons sometimes, and that kind of thing. And that's all like very out in the open, and we're all like copacetic with that.
Just as a cosplayer and as someone ace, I'm like, how do you do it at cons? Aren't you exhausted? Aren't you covered in body paint? Where do you
exhausted?
Put your...
Yes, body paint. No.
But then also being ace, I have the amount of times I'll tell someone, I'll be like, I'm a cosplayer, and the amount of like guys who seem to think they know what that is, who are like, oh, like you're gonna cosplay my wife,
sweaty and gross and annoying.
And I'm like, first of all. There are so many male characters I cosplay, so I'm often wearing a binder. So I'm not necessarily cosplaying your sexy waifu.
Right.
Like, sorry. Second of all, but my big thing, my sibling is really amazing at sewing, and my thing is that I'm really good with special effects makeup. And so we kind of like work together to make our cosplays as good as we can. She's the Elsa to my Anna. My sibling's amazing, and I love her so much. Anyway, but like, so for me, before I've even seen a show, if I see a character set up and there's someone with like green skin, I'm like, oh, that's the one I'm gonna be. Like, I can feel it. So like when we first saw Saru for Discovery, I was like, oh no. But then I'm sorry, Doug Jones. And then I was like, I'm sorry, Doug Jones. I have a better ass than him. I can't do it. I can't pull it off. No, but
I would love for us to talk about is there are anytime someone is non-normative in any way, there are like kind of ridiculous like stereotypes and
Oh my god.
and
I'm sorry that this light is hitting me. Like,
You're fine. You're fine.
I'll just do this.
And I was thinking it would be useful, informative to kind of go through some of the misconceptions and some of the ridiculous things that people think about
Yes.
sexual identities and gender identities that don't
Absolutely.
fit into binaries. And I think probably the most, this is just my sense, is that the most common of those is that folks who don't fit into those kinds of binaries are confused and don't.
Yes.
I'm confused by a lot of things, but not necessarily this.
Right.
Like, I'm confused about porn.
Right. and I'm confused about gender, just not mine. There was one comment in particular that I heard from someone who was an older trans woman who was doing a discussion, and somebody brought up non-binary people, and she was like, "Oh, well, that's a kid thing, and eventually they figure it out." And that was what and I was just like, yeah, like, even as someone who understood myself as a mostly binary trans woman at the time, I was like, oh, that's gross. I don't like that at all. First of all, because like there are
yikes from me, dog.
Like, you don't hear about us super often, at least in mainstream culture, but non-binary adults surely exist. I am a 35-year-old one of those now. But I think there's a bit of a grosser sort of pervasive idea underneath that that allows people to be just sort of neatly dismissed, and that like you're not real until you pick a side, whether we're talking about gender or sexuality. And
you can't be bilingual. You'll right. You'll find a nice language and settle down eventually.
English or Spanish, pick a side.
Just pick one.
And
Japanese, that's not a thing, honey.
And I'm interested in your thoughts on this too, but I think what offends me the most about that is that I have spent more time thinking about my relationship to gender than I feel like most people ever do.
That's
and
fair, yeah.
The people who have spent zero time asking that question of themselves are often the people who are telling me I'm confused about mine. And I'm just like, I've done the work, my friend. Like, you read a Facebook post and like, oh, those people are confused.
I mean, I will also say that I've never been confused about that, and I'm totally open to it. So there is also the factor of who the hell the person is, because I feel like they're just bad, awful, terrible people that don't want to learn and pay attention.
Right, because when somebody says like, I'm this thing, and I'm like, huh, I've never heard of that before. That doesn't make sense to me. My instinct is to be like, hey, I don't think I'm familiar with that. Would you be okay like answering some questions?
Yeah.
And if not, I can Google it. It's fine.
Yeah, either way. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anna, you were saying.
So my first kiss with like tongue was in college, and it was for a film. I was acting in a film. And it was funny because the director actually said to me, like, oh my God, this is going to be your first kiss? Are you okay with this then doing this? And I was just like, I'm more than okay with this, because like, what are the other options? You have a first kiss and then like later you break up with that person and it's like a tainted memory. No, I'm just going to meet this actress who has a boyfriend, is very sweet and cool, and we can be friends for life. And she's like, oh, it's your first kiss? Let me teach you. Like, it was great. Like, I was like, please do. This is very foreign to me. And there was no sexual or romantic attraction whatsoever. It was, we were acting for a film that was like an 80s style zombie movie. Don't worry about it. Like, we weren't thinking like, ooh,
and I think that those attitudes about that are also part of what the problem is. Like, why is that so sacred? Like, Jesus Christ, calm down, like, it's not anything, like, literally 99% of the population, that's never anything that they follow up with, like the rest of their life,
Exactly.
like, why does that matter? It's so,
I've had a lot of people
It can be cute or whatever,
romanticize-
but people use
Yeah.
that, I think, in bad ways. Yeah.
I know like so many there's all this like idolization of like virginity too, especially from like men who are like, oh, she's untouched and like, and I'm just
Ugh.
like,
Yeah.
no, you know what? If anything, that just
So
makes my
creepy.
standards for you higher.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, oh, really? This is what people were talking about? I think you might just suck at it, dude. Like, it can't be that popular if it's really only this. So I think you suck. Like, it's so ridiculous. There's that happens in like 50 Shades of Grey. Like,
what's the most ridiculous misconception or stereotype about asexual people at least like that you have experienced in your view?
well, there's always so you reproduce asexually.
Oh God.
And I'm like,
That's hilarious.
when you're not dating someone, do you reproduce asexually? Like,
thank God, no. That would be
like,
terrible.
I don't do mitosis. I'm not a single-celled organism.
God.
There are multi-celled organisms who reproduce asexually.
Yeah, well, what is it? In one of my favorite moments in Deep Space Nine is the reoccurring joke. There's a character we never see on camera that they talk about who's Ensign
Captain Baudet.
No. Ensign Villix Prim.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Ensign Villix Pram. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Who they mention that he's budding.
The pregnant man.
It's like, oh, you put him away from this thing. Why? It's like, I thought it best because of his condition. What's his condition? Oh, he's budding, sir. He's pregnant. And then they're like talking about hosting a baby shower for him, and we don't actually ever know what species he is, but and he does get promoted. He goes from ensign to lieutenant later in the series. He's had like 4 budding cycles at this point. So they mentioned that he's going to have anywhere from like, they mentioned it's like going to be anywhere from like 8 to 12 kids or like it was like 8 to 20 kids at the end, because it like can be like 2 to 12 infants after the budding. And they mentioned like, oh, he's gonna have bigger quarters because he's gonna have all these kids, and they never mention a spouse. They never mention a partner. They just mention this ensign who then becomes lieutenant, who reproduces asexually. And I'm like, oh my god, Starfleet is so good about like single parent time off for kids, because like he was able to get promoted. That's amazing.
Starfleet must have a generous paternity leave policy.
They do. That's so nice
and
of
Jake
them.
babysits even at one point. They talk about it. Like,
That's funny.
so we'll ask Sirach about that tomorrow. But
Wait.
but I do get like so you reproduce asexually, and there's this element of like, as you were saying, of, oh, that's something that happens with kids. They'll grow out of it. There's this element of infantilizing of like any of it. So it's like, one, we're not all kids for starters. There's a lot of adults. I'm an adult, you know, and even if it is a kid,
patronizing to assume that anyone who doesn't hold your viewpoint is a child. Like,
exactly.
What?
It's very much like well, you know, you'll become more conservative when you're older.
Not anymore.
Yeah, the older I get,
sure.
the closer I am to building a guillotine. Frankly.
Yeah, like so not to get political, but I find that one's just insulting. But when it's the more of less about the blatantly trying to insult me and thinking they're funny, is the one for asexuality, like that you don't have feelings. Like beyond romantic, but just like no feelings. A lot of people will be like, "Oh, so you're Sheldon from Big Bang
you're
Theory."
An android, okay,
or like something. And I'm like,
which that's also very anti-autistic and gross.
Exactly, and I'm like, I don't have autism. Not everyone who has autism is asexual. That's a really harmful stereotype.
And having autism isn't inherently a bad thing either.
Oh, exactly. Like, exactly. Nor is being asexual. And there's also a lot of like, you're broken.
Yeah.
And actually, that's part of why I resisted identifying as ace for so long. I was actually in a friend group of people who were in the queer community, that I felt were just pressuring me to identify as ace, not because they were like, we think you're ace, but it was almost like, oh, you don't enjoy sex talk as much as we do, so you must be ace. And it just felt more like they were saying there was something wrong with me. So I was like, I don't feel comfortable with that. And then after I stopped being friends with them because they were assholes, I felt comfortable in going, yeah, no, I don't have like this sex drive really, and that's just, it's not who I am, and I feel like I'm ace. But when it felt like I was being labeled, when I felt like I was being labeled as broken, I was like, no, that's not me. I'm not broken.
Also, no one likes a label that someone else forces on you, regardless of if it happens to be true in the moment or not. Like nobody wants to be like, you're this, like no matter what. So,
Well, and
like,
that's,
and also just like don't out people.
Also that.
Yeah.
Like,
and that
not
speaks
all people.
to the larger concern that like folks of all like queer and trans stripes probably deal with at one point or another, is the assumption that we are the way we are because of some kind of trauma in our past. Like, if you're gay, you must have been sexually abused, or if you're trans, I had it suggested.
I have been asked if I've been raped.
Yeah.
So many times.
I'm so gay and have never been sexually abused. I'm just saying. Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
I've never been sexually assaulted. I'm very lucky, but
I've had it suggested to me a couple of times that I'm trans because my dad never chose to be a part of my life. And like sure, that's a traumatic experience. But the assumption being that like I identified more with women because a woman raised me by herself.
There would be a lot more trans people.
Well, right. I was like, I have a whole bunch of friends from single parent households.
What happened to them?
Like women friends who were raised by men that didn't turn out to be trans men. Like none of this.
Are they
makes
broken?
Sense, right?
Like...
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. And that's the underlying assumption that there's just something fundamentally broken about you because you're not quote unquote normal, whatever we have decided normal to be. You're not that, therefore you're broken, therefore you must have some kind of trauma that you're working through in your past. And what sucks is often like queerness and transness and trauma are correlated with one another, but the causal relationship is reverse of that. Like the trauma that we the trauma that we undergo is because of the way that we have been treated for being queer or trans, that not the other way around.
And also being bi as well. I said bisexual earlier, but that's not really, it's more like I'm bi-romantic, and then people always assume that means I'm equally attracted to men as I am to women. Not the case.
And leaves non-binary folks completely out.
And leaves non-binary people out. Not the case. I am usually most attracted to men, so I identified as straight for a very long time. I used to call myself cis-het scum. because like all my friends were queer, so I was like, yeah, and I'm the cis-het scum of the group. Hey, like,
and so let's talk about this for a second, because we've got about 9 minutes left, and I want to make, because this is important. There is, we talk about asexual. Do you reproduce asexually? Often the retort to someone saying I'm bisexual is and saying like, no, that's actually not exclusionary toward non-binary people. The retort is, well, bi means two. So it's like, let's talk through that for a second.
For starters, I'm more likely to be interested if we were to truly say, okay, well, I can only have two. I'm more likely to go for men and non-binary people because I'm not often attracted to women. It happens. Janelle Monáe exists, and I'm not blind. Like it's just there.
Homo flexible.
Did you see
gay,
that's just how you make me feel video? Like.
It's true.
I used to describe just having sexual arousal to my friend. I was like, it's just very aggravating because I'm so offended. And I was like, hey, and I messaged my friend who I'd told that to before, and I was like, hey, have you seen that Janelle Monáe music video? It's offensive to me. Like, that's because I was being like,
I'm feeling pain.
And I'm offended by my body. But like, yeah, so sometimes I'm attracted to women. It's rarer. But if we were to say bi as in two, then that would actually be including non-binary and men.
Right.
But
well,
also,
I think it's just terminology, right? That term came before people started talking about like different gender fluidities.
Yes.
That like it was just like, oh, it's a gay person or a person who likes men, and so I think the term came first. So
Well,
yeah,
so here's an interesting bit
There's
of
pansexual.
etymology,
right.
Because the term bisexual is actually it originated describing what we now call intersex conditions.
Oh, okay.
Because
forgot about
if
that,
you
but I
look,
did
yeah,
read that
if you
once.
look in the literature and history, the way that bisexuality was described is what we now call intersex.
Mhm.
And so it didn't even initially describe a sexual orientation, which is
Mhm.
interesting.
Yes.
And a lot of this comes back to the fact that, like, when I say non-binary, that means one specific thing to me. The word non-binary means lots of different things to different people, and it's all valid. And that it comes back to being able to sort of sit in the discomfort and saying that, like, not everyone's definition of bisexual is the same, and that's okay. Not everyone's definition of pansexual is the same, and that's okay. I've heard some people say that bisexual is like, I'm attracted to my own gender and other genders, so my attraction goes in two separate directions.
There you go. That's two,
bisexual,
right? Me and not me. There you go. I like that.
But there are some folks who say that definition doesn't quite resonate with them, and
Sure.
that's okay too.
There are people who identify as pansexual, pan
Yes.
meaning all. The way I've mostly understood pan versus bi, though, has been a lot of my friends who are pansexual view it as, like, to them it's all the same if they're intimate with a man, woman, or anything. It's all the same to them. They are not even thinking about gender. To me, it is different. The way I pursue a man versus a woman is very different. And how much of that is just based on society versus whether that's just a different type of sexuality, I can't know, because society affects us so much.
So much, yeah.
So to
None of
me,
us
I
live in
go
a
more
vacuum against society.
Right.
Like, there's no way
Yep.
that, yeah.
I go more with bi because it is more different in that way, but it's not any less good. Like, there's no, like, there's not a one I prefer. There's
Right.
male again is what I usually end up being attracted to,
Right.
but it's
And it's
not
also,
even my
like,
choice.
I think it's also, things like that are just a shortcut because you don't want to have a 20-minute conversation about this with someone.
Yes,
It's easier just to be like,
Exactly.
I'm bi.
Exactly.
Look, let's just start there.
I
You
have to
know,
spend.
like-
I already have to spend those 20 minutes on asexuality. I don't have time to explain
Exactly. So it's a
pansexuality.
great
So I'm just
shortcut
like,
just to start with, and
Yep.
then if you want to have a conversation, we can. But if you say bi and they're immediately like, I don't understand, like, then you don't have to explain the whole thing. They're ridiculous.
Yeah.
my shorthand is often everyone's hot, but no one touch me.
Yeah,
which
right.
isn't even totally accurate, because it happens that I'm aroused sometimes.
Shortcuts.
Also, if I'm involved with someone, like, if I care about you and that's something you need, then of course I'll do that because I care about you. And it's not truly literally no one touch me. I'm the biggest hugger. When I get drunk, the only thing I want to do is cuddle people, which is why when I start drinking, I literally, like, look at the couch I'm going to sit down and I ask people, like, who is okay being non-sexually cuddled? I say that when I start drinking. And then it's always like one of my friends will raise their hand. I'm like, cool, sitting next to you for the night, because I will end up just on someone.
Yeah. I definitely I go back and forth on sexuality labels, and I don't think it's a super important thing in my life that I find a word that fits. If I never find one, that's fine.
Right.
Like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, Randy, honestly, the reason why it matters to me mostly is just so, like, I have a word to tell someone that is at least shorthand that gives some people an idea. And that's why I just call myself queer. Because I'm just like most women are hot, most non-binary people are hot, men are hot every once in a while. And like, those are the general rules, but, like, I don't know. Also, I'm non-binary, so anyone who likes me is queer.
Right.
So, and I think it's been so freeing to me to, like, recognize the ways in which I don't fit neatly into those binaries, and it helped, like, learning to see myself that way has helped me stop seeing so much of the world that way too. And, like, being able to find what's beautiful about a person in whatever their gender happens to be, right? Because if I really internalize the idea that you can't know someone's gender just by looking at them, I can't just look at that person and be like, that's a really hot man, because I don't actually know that that's who that person is, right? And so it's helped me shed a little bit of that baggage and saying like, that's a really cute person that I would like to go flirt with. I'll make sure to ask their pronouns before I do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So we've only got 1 minute left here. And Randy, do you have any questions?
I have so many questions. But
as the boring one here.
no, I tried to like to interject them. Like this is it's funny. I think you know what the one question that I'm going to pose before we head out is
and there's a break after this. So if we go a couple of minutes over, I'm cool with that.
Yes, for sure.
I'm down.
It's funny, and like I separate myself from the feelings as much as I can as well. But just because I've taught myself that through whatever, like, oh, I'm having this feeling, I'm gonna like be outside of it and think about it. But like my body wants to feel guilty for being so actually inside of one box when talking about, and like I know that that's not valid at all, but like my body goes there and then like I pull outside, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, Randy, what are you talking about? Doesn't make any sense. But my instinct is to be like, oh gosh, I'm a boy and I totally fit like in this actual like gay man box or whatever that is, and like having these discussions like makes me feel guilty somehow, even though like I'm in no wonderful position as a gay man these days. Like that stuff happens, but still it's so interesting. So I wonder if maybe like part of that is why other people have a hard time with the discussion. Not because, you know, like people who you think would be totally open to it and whatever, and maybe come across as not as open as you think. Like maybe it's a guilty feeling versus a like, you know, a disgust feeling or an I don't get it feeling. Like guilty, like, oh God, like this is someone's struggle who I should be able to understand and I can't. I think maybe that's the feeling. Learning
like,
is the antidote for that. But yeah,
like as someone who, you know, I genuinely, most of my friends,
Marta! Sorry, I wanted to drop that in. Hi.
Well, absolutely. I didn't want to say your name, Marta, because I wasn't sure how much you were comfortable with me like saying, but Marta's my sibling, the greatest person in the world. Literally, like, not sheltering together has been hell for me. If she ever gets drunk, ask her about the Crusades. You will get your own private drunk history.
Cool.
She was a history major, and she'll tell you about the Crusades. Last night, she messaged me about being drunk, and I immediately responded, "Let's talk about the Crusades." And then she sent me like 2 messages that weren't related, and then I just got a wall of text all about the Crusades, and it was amazing.
Wonderful.
I think to speak to what you were talking about, Randy, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I'm not sure that I had considered that before. And I think
it's people insecure about being so boring. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
But I think that might be what it is, though. And I think
internal conversation.
But that doesn't mean like, because like, you know, because if we're talking about like the conversations around like sexuality and gender, I have hours and hours and hours and hours of deep, insightful discussion to be had there. But like Randy, I'm sure there are things about you that I'm just like, this makes zero sense to me, and this is so interesting because I am boring on that particular axis. But where like you have so much deep insight and knowledge that makes you a deeply wonderful and nuanced and complicated person. And if your gender and sexuality aren't that about you, that's okay, because there are things about you that are that, right?
right. Of course,
I mean,
of course. And
the
like,
concept of having an erection to me is just mind blowing. I'm not even kidding about that. That's not even a joke. I'm like, wait, so your body just says howdy?
I'm just saying I don't miss it.
It does. And I'm saying I think I would. So
that's totally fair. Totally fair.
And that's everyone's different, and that's what's beautiful about it.
Yes.
And I think, what also boggles my mind is that people who are very anti any of this stuff if anytime you talk to them, they probably have this beautiful picture of like God creating nature and it's like splendor and it's wonderful diversity or whatever. But then you'd be like, well, why can't people be a little more diverse than 2 fucking buckets that you want to put them in? And they're like,
Exactly.
and it's like, well,
Yeah.
like you're like flowers are different colors and shapes. Why wouldn't people be the same way? And like you
Right.
can't.
Exactly.
There's just not. I don't understand it.
Well, and this
It's
is
also like
this is a
sorry.
conversation that is had in the trans community so often, right? Because there are, you know, trans men and trans women, non-binary people, and like non-binary itself is a spectrum, right? Because non-binary is inherently identifying something you are not, right? And so non-binary is not like a third gender that some people are. It's an umbrella term that describes a ton of different things. And like that's like some people are put off by that, and to me that's exciting, right? Because there's like
as a Trek fan,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there are so many.
Like your body does that, you know?
Yeah, like there's so many newer, different words that people have come up with to describe their gender, and some people like roll their eyes like, more like made up SJW language. But I'm just like, that is so exciting to me that people are figuring out ways to express these like complicated and nuanced questions about who they are. Like that's so exciting to me. And for people who claim to be interested in humanity as a species and sociology, like I don't understand how that's not exciting to people. It can be uncomfortable, and that's okay, because society teaches us what we're comfortable with, and sometimes we have to be uncomfortable to grow. But like overall, like that nuance and complication is just so exciting and inspiring and wonderful and beautiful to me.
I have a friend who's queer and he's a very strong Christian. I just want to say this. He was saying like, I would never hate trans people or, you know, non-binary thing because I love God. Because I love God, I am in awe of his diverse his diverse creation and how beautiful it is. And I think that was just like, and as Trek fans, like, don't tell me that you can like learn Klingon and get fascinated in that, and then you can't learn someone else's pronouns. Come on. Like,
and also quickly, God, we're way over time.
Yeah, we got it.
I also want to say quickly, language can shape how you think and feel.
Yes.
So trying to conform yourself into a language is terrible. Because when I learned, it's funny because I studied other languages, and when I either like think or speak in those languages, I have different feelings about things than when it's in English. So don't like put yourself in a bucket of like English words because that's useless. Oh, thank you, Anne. We love you.
Yeah, thank you for commenting.
We love everyone who came to hang out. It was great to meet Marta for the first time. We hear all about you because Anna loves you so much, and I love that you love each other so much. It's adorable. I love sibling love.
Yes, the best.
But yes, thank you, Callie. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone watching. Let's pull back into the
Center
team
for
to
Black
say hi.
Equity.
Yeah, please donate.
Donate.
And here's Nikki, and you guys are muted still.
I'm
so
on
just
I'm
FYI.
muted. Sorry, I didn't realize we were
Okay,
jumping
no,
back
you're
in.
great. You're good. You're
Yeah,
good.
gee, thanks. I got up for 2 seconds and you like pulled us in.
Oh, sorry. You looked ready.
I'm going
That's fair. I'm very sorry.
repeat what people have been saying, but thank you so much. Just the conversation that you know, because I was listening as you guys were talking. So amazing, great questions. I learned a lot. And so thank you. And thank you to who was our donator?
That was domestic.
Probably just use the first name just to be safe.
Carl.
Yeah, no,
Carl.
thank you. Carl. Thank you for
Carl.
donating. And
Carl.
I
Thank
sent
you,
in the
Carl.
match for $100. So now we have $200. However, please continue to donate. Okay. Because even if it's just $1, $5, whatever it is, it's all important. And the Center for Black Equity, they do so much more than just like providing information. Like they go into equipping community leaders and they give them tools, and it's amazing how much work go check out their website. I'm still learning all of the stuff that they're doing. So thank you again for everyone. We so appreciate it. Thank you, Anna, Callie, and Randy, for your conversation today.
We could go for hours. I'm sorry I had to even cut us off. We could go for hours.
No, it's good.
But super interesting. Super interesting. I love you guys. It's wonderful.
And just to plug one more time, tomorrow evening after our program, we will have an open Zoom link. So if you guys want to continue, and you know what, I shouldn't say guys, if you folks, everyone watching,
See,
if
once again,
people
language, but there's nothing
would
we can do.
like-
Guys,
Yeah,
gal,
right?
non-binary pals.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everyone watching, if you would like to join us, please come. We will have an open Zoom link and you can come and talk to us.
Yeah,
directly.
come. Yeah, we'll post the link when it gets closer, just because it's useless now. It'll get buried and you'll forget it and lose it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll post the link tomorrow to come hang out in the
Yeah.
Zoom chat and just actually, talk to us. It'll be a little bit faster. So
Yay.
Okay.
cool. That being said, Heather, our drag queen, is getting ready in the wings, so we're just going to take a really quick break for just 5 minutes so I can run pee, and we will be back with some drag fashion review fun. It will be very exciting.
Yay.
Thank
With a
you,
PC
guys.
background.
The donate
What?
button should be below the video on Twitch, and it should
And on
be
the
a shop
button on
shop
Facebook.
now button on Facebook. Yes.
Correct. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.